Energy Transition 90. Venezuela wants Guyana's oil. Some people talk as Guyana. In Brazil is Guyana, but internationally, I suppose, it's Guyana. Good morning, David Blackmon. Let me show David Blackmon. Yeah, this is his LinkedIn. Good morning, Stuart Tully, his LinkedIn page.
Good morning.
And good afternoon, Dr. Temi Nimet. This is her page. And this is me.
Yay, Armando.
Yeah, hi. It's very good to see you both. Please let me share a video, very short one, 40 seconds, from ExxonMobil president.
I mean, they can't defend themselves if the Venezuelans decide they want to do something.
I'm not sure Guyana is standing on its own, to tell you the truth. I think, there are a lot of, we've all seen what happens when nation sovereignties are challenged and unilateral actions taken. I think the world and the outside community have grown pretty sensitive to that. So my expectation is there's more support, more broad support in the international community to make sure that the right process are followed to resolve this dispute. From our perspective, we know what we need to do in country, develop those resources economically, environmentally responsibly, and do what we've been contracted to do. That's what our organization is focused on.
I'm not sure Guyana is standing on its own, Stuart Turley. For oil companies, Stuart, your opinion, please. Is it better the reserves be in Guyana or Venezuela?
Well, I'll tell you, just to start it off, thank you so much for having me this morning. Good afternoon, good evening, everything else. I love your interviews, intros. Guyana, I don't think can stand on its own. And when you have Hess and Chevron, and they've been supporting it, and then you have Maduro, who has been in charge for Venezuela. The only reason that man is in charge is because he has made all of his generals millionaires. He takes care of his generals. The generals take care of the colonels. The colonels go out and they take care of the sergeants. Sergeants go out in the street and beat the snot out of everybody. And so that's how he's keeping control. Guyana has a tugboat out there and they call that their Navy. And we're doing ships out there with them. David, you've had probably the best single stories out there. But Guyana's 11 billion barrels in reserves. They're only doing about 400,000 barrels per day now. They could be 3x in a few years. Here's the gotcha. Why is Maduro going after Guyana? It's because the great Venezuelan oil machine has been crippled for so many years due to his corruption. And if he shows up on my doorstep, you're going to see me jumping under my desk. But it's because of the corruption. They've destroyed the Venezuelan fields. So why is our President Biden, relieving the sanctions on Venezuela to get more oil to the market because he can't steal anymore from the strategic oil preserves? And so this chess match going on with the Biden administration is basically put the thumb under Guyana, in either intentionally or unintentionally. I don't know yet, but it's because of stupidity in geopolitical. And I hope I didn't cross the line or if I made sense, which is rare for me on a Monday morning. I noticed David's over there and Tammy are both going, yeah. Pull him off the stage.
You brought some good points, David, because 11, he mentioned 11 billion barrels of recovered reserves, and the production was 3 million barrels a day. Now it's 700, going to 1.2. They are forecasting 1.2 in 2024. How do you see this amount of money being, let's see, in a war?
Well, Venezuela is, by many estimates, the wealthiest country in the world in terms of just pure reserves of crude oil. And yes, Maduro and before him, Hugo Chavez. I mean, the Venezuelan oil and gas industry was very vibrant when Hugo Chavez took over in 1999. Chavez didn't do all that much to destroy it until he decided to confiscate the holdings of foreign countries or companies in his country. I was at Shell when all that began to percolate up at the top in 2007. Maduro has completely collapsed his industry and his whole country's economy. The inflation rate in Brazil, we Americans whine about a 6 or 8% rate of inflation. This year's inflation rate in Venezuela is 359%. And that's a vast improvement from the 65,400% rate of inflation in 2018. That's the Maduro economy. So Bidenomics looks pretty good compared to that. But yeah, Maduro's desperate to find a new source of income. ExxonMobil and Hess and the Chinese national oil company CNOOC have done a fine job of developing the Stabroek Block in a very responsible and efficient way. They're going to be producing, as Stu said, 1 million barrels a day by 2027, at which point Guyana would rank as about the 12th largest exporter of crude oil on the face of the earth. It's the fastest growing economy on the face of the earth the last 2 years. And so it's no secret why Maduro is doing this. And I suspect, although no one, I think, has established hard links yet, but Maduro made his announcement that he was going to hold this recent referendum 3 days after he met with Vladimir Putin, or had a phone call with Vladimir Putin, 2 weeks after he had met with Xi Jinping. Both those countries, China and Russia, have established major economic and military inroads in Venezuela over the last 5 years. And I suspect those two countries are playing a big role in motivating this as well. And the question just becomes now, what is the Biden administration going to do about it? They held joint military exercises last week with the Guyanese security force. They don't call it an army, they call it a security force. It's very small. Obviously, this is a country of 800,000 people. So Guyana, if Venezuela does decide to mount a military operation, Guyana will need the help of the United States and Brazil and other interested countries.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Dr. Temi, Maduro enters in an election campaign next year, and Venezuela probably will hold some, we suppose they will hold elections. And probably he's trying to avoid to discuss internal problems and making war something bigger. What do you think about this?
That's a really good point. I think with respect to what's going on there, there's lots of different variables and factors involved. And I think David's highlighted two really important ones, and that's Russia and China involved in, support. I don't think Maduro would have gone and done this without the backing of those two nations. I mean, China holds, I think they're the biggest debt holder in Venezuela, so they can't really keep operating without financial assistance from China. When Chavez changed when they kicked out the private companies, they said only state oil firms were allowed to develop in Venezuela, and so you had Rosneft get involved, you had the Chinese National Oil Company get involved and whatnot, and so when the production goes down, and they're looking to build back up again, I think Guyana's Guyana's a threat. They're a threat to Venezuela's future. So when you have China and Russia doing this kind of thing, and they will seek to benefit because it puts the United States off balance. It's in the American backyard. It's another distraction away from what's going on in Ukraine. Will the United States be more likely to insist on some kind of negotiated settlement with the war in Ukraine now that they have this distraction? Does it allow China more flexibility in asserting its power in the South China Sea and in the Middle East and whatnot, because America's distracted in in its own backyard. So there's all of these other issues, and then of course Maduro's happy to do it because he's like, oh, okay, I can help in this situation, and I have an election coming up, which will distract the local people, and we can push nationalism and this kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it baffles me, like you mentioned, that Venezuela has all of these incredible resources. They have these massive reserves. So why do they need more? They have the first or second largest reserves in the world. Why do they need this? Well, I would submit that they don't need it. It's to keep it off the market, because then it earns more for Venezuela for whatever production they do manage to squeak out in its corrupt system.
Perfect.
Great.
Good morning, John. Thank you for
Good morning,
coming.
John.
Morning, John.
But Tammy, you put something very interesting, because Venezuela has a huge reserves, 300 billion barrels, recovered barrels, but they need, because the type of oil they have in the reserves, they need technologies and products to solve this production, and they do not have alone. They need United States very close to them to produce this thoroughly.
Do what now? Yeah, I'm sorry, my system cut out. What was the
No
question
problem.
again?
The question is the following: Venezuela, to produce more oil than producing today,
Right.
they need United States supporting with companies like Halliburton, Schlumberger. So they cannot produce alone.
No, they absolutely cannot. And their infrastructure has been weakened so much over all of the last so many years, very much like the French in their nuclear fleet. They never put any money back into it. Oil and gas does not happen without maintenance. Oil and gas does not happen without CapEx investment into new wells, into infrastructure. None of that has been done. It's kind of like if Maduro was wanting to bring in and say, I'm going to give a general millions of dollars or invest back into my infrastructure. Okay. So, General Juanito Juarez gets $1 million, and then this offshore rig falls into the sea. So that's exactly what's been going on.
Yeah, and David, you see that
I would add there that.
Sorry, go ahead, please.
Go ahead, Tammy.
Armando, I would add that that the State Oil Company of China invested heavily in the oil sands, which uses a similar technology for extracting the type of oil that's in Venezuela. So, yeah, I think they do need some American support for further developing their resources and whatnot. But I think that the Chinese State Oil Company, if they wanted to, could help increase that production. That's just my point of view there.
Is that the same one that Hunter's on the board? I'm not sure.
No.
Okay.
Yeah,
just
Tammy, in Russia, Schlumberger, Halliburton, and Baker are working very hard there. They are the high technology that sometimes is necessary to produce.
Okay. Yeah.
David, do you see the U.S. has a position in terms of Guyana or Venezuela own the reserves? It depends on the party. I mean, Democrats or Republicans are different.
Well, it shouldn't. We have the Monroe Doctrine that's been in effect in the United States for 200 years. And that just basically says that anytime a foreign power is making an incursion into the Western Hemisphere, whose interests are hostile to those of the United States and the rest of the Western Hemisphere, the United States military would intervene to prevent that from happening. It's obviously been happening in Venezuela with Russia and China coming. I mean, China's in the process of establishing a military base in Venezuela right now. So that's a clear threat to American interests. This is a clear-cut case of declaring this U.S. vital interest under the Monroe Doctrine. The dispute, now this dispute goes back all the way to 1899 over the Essequibo, territory, which makes up 2/3 or almost 3/4 of Guyana's geography, and about 125,000 of the 800,000 citizens of Guyana live in the Essequibo region. In 1899, an international panel that was, I really don't even understand how it was constituted, declared this to be territory of Guyana, which had been a British territory at the time. The Venezuelan government in 1899 disputed that finding as an example of colonialism. But in 1905, Venezuela's government, as a result of a negotiation, agreed to the current borders along with the Guyanese government. And so this has been an established border, an established Guyanese region since 1905 for 118 years. And Venezuela has attempted to raise this claim periodically in the intervening years since, whenever it turns out some gold mine was discovered in Guyana, or, and now you have the big oil presence that the most of the Stabroek block offshore would go along with this, convey with the Essequibo region. So, I mean, this is clearly just an economic grab. Venezuela's claims, some people will say, well, it's legitimate, but, this is 118 years of an established border. And to be raising it now is just clearly an act of aggression and a grab for the billions of dollars in revenues that stand to accrue from the Stabroek block. And so I just think it's really pretty clear example of an instance where we can expect the American government and the American military to intervene on behalf of Guyana. And I think that means that at the end of the day, Maduro is not going to make any sort of military incursion.
We have a comment from John.
All the majors are buying up.
Yeah,
well, that's certainly true in the shale plays in the United States.
Yeah. I would like to add, because something, United States are importing 7 million barrels a day at this time. And with the problems, restrictions from Middle East oil, so come from Venezuela could be very interesting in terms of logistics. Stuart, Tammy, and David.
Yeah, and especially this is a heartbreaker on that. And I would much rather trade with our beloved Canadians on the heavy oil sands. And let's see, a Keystone pipeline might have helped that a bunch. We would not need to import that. And David and Tammy, this is something that has been talked about. David has written about that, and that is the blending of our refineries needs the heavier oil to come from the sweet oil out of the Permian and our other basins. So we need heavier oil. And so where it's going to get kind of ugly on that is when we take a look at the importing and the blending. We may be doing 7 million barrels per day importing. We wouldn't have to. Right now they're coming in by rail, and you can't get that much in by rail. I believe Warren Buffett owned most of that rail. We'll leave that alone.
There are a fair number of pipelines as well that come from Canada, and Canada is the number one supplier to the United States. We overtook Saudi Arabia some time ago. And it's interesting when you look at the Energy Information Agency data about oil imports, and you see Venezuela just fall off a cliff and Canada takes up. And you're right. I mean, Keystone could have been such a huge benefit to the United States, Fortress North America and all that, which is one of the reasons why the Biden administration wanted to make sure it was canceled, so there couldn't be a Fortress North America. Mexico is also a large exporter to the United States, but their supplies are starting to drop. Guyana recently has started to, of course, be a supplier to the United States, but it's quite small, but not that much smaller than Venezuela, which is interesting. And historically, Venezuela has been part of the Western Hemisphere coalition of exporters to the United States, which was supposed to be a counterbalance to the Middle Eastern oil. And the Middle Eastern oil was supposed to predominantly supply Europe. And then you had the Western Hemisphere sources that were supposed to supply the United States and North America. And there was supposed to be this sort of interdependence. But of course, with Chavez, that all kind of, and the various other coups that have taken place in Venezuela over the years, often throw that into disarray. But then it comes to, I think, Brazil in all of this, because Brazil is supposed to be, they're not the mediator for this meeting that's supposed to take place on Thursday between Venezuela and Guyana, on a Caribbean island, but they're there as an observer. And I'm curious to know what Armando thinks
Yeah.
about the role of Brazil in this, because
Yeah.
if you think about it, there's a question there about Iran. Well, that's part of the BRICS Plus now, and so is this a way for the BRICS to sort of assert their own strength of oil supply in the face of COP28 and everything else? And Brazil's part of that. So what side are they going to take in this dispute? Armando, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that is not a good face to Brazil, because we are being friends of a dictator. That's the real case, and the median class in Brazil do not accept this situation. And Maduro in the past threatened Brazil several times with the limits. Yeah, we are not so friends as can be. And another thing, Brazil exporting more than 1 million barrels a day. And
Right.
I see that a great opportunity to the United States to receive this 1 million barrels a day, because, and I do not know how they do not reach a good deal in this.
Can I ask a follow up to Tammy's great
Sure.
comments? Sorry,
Sure.
Tammy, did not mean to compliment you, but great comments. With Brazil being admitted into OPEC Plus, that would follow into that. Armand, there's this great company called Petrobras, and I believe the CEO of Petrobras said, "We don't care about we don't need no stinking quotas, and we're going to pump everything we can." I believe that was in a movie a long time ago. We don't need no badges. He doesn't like no quotas as he goes in. Do you think that BRICS and OPEC Plus are going to play into the Brazilian oil markets?
It's a
That's a great
dubious
question.
position. So it's not clear the direction we are taking,
Okay.
because OPEC plus BRICS at the same time trying to be a developing country. So
Right.
it's complicated for Brazil, I suppose.
And
It's
green. You're
complicated.
Brazil. Lula's around there, going around telling everybody how green they're going to be, and they're going to be all this renewable stuff. But at the same time, increasing oil production. It's one of those
It's yeah,
contradictions, I guess.
exactly, everything at the same time, and the opposition directions is not good. And some people are afraid to be maduration in Brazil. So the current government goes to the
Yeah.
Maduro's trend. It's not a good thing, for my opinion. There are people thinking differently, David Blackman.
But your
David,
point, your
yeah,
point
sure.
about Brazil's potential to be a major exporter into the United States is a great one, because between Brazil, Venezuela, Guyana, Mexico, and Canada, the United States really would have no
Perfect.
need to import oil from any other part of the world
Yeah.
outside the Western
Exactly.
Hemisphere.
It's
If,
a nice
if these
strategy. Yeah.
refining companies arrange their contracts with those 5 major supply and growing suppliers. Venezuela, if it could get its industry back on track, was once exporting almost 3 million barrels of oil per day.
Yep,
And it's now,
absolutely.
what, 500,000 or something like that. Chevron is continuing to operate down there in Venezuela. It managed not to have its assets confiscated by the Chavez government. And so it's really almost the entire industry in
Exactly.
Venezuela right now.
And Iran picked up that slack because they're now over what I believe it's 3.5 million.
Yeah, they're over 3 million.
And
Yeah.
when Biden took office, they were at 400,000.
Yeah.
So huge win for Iran picking up that slack.
Yeah.
And David, it could be something regional, and some countries being friends and supporting themselves, and we do not reach this point. David, I cannot read, sorry, because I have several things in the same screen. If you can help me.
It is my understanding that Iran's IRGC operatives are well established in Venezuela. Isn't it also possible that Iran figures in Maduro's decision to pursue aggression against its neighbor? Certainly. And Maduro is a bad guy, folks. Let's just all be honest about this. Maduro is
Are
a
you
very bad guy
serious?
who is more than happy to be influenced by terrorist supporting regimes like Iran, by China, by Russia. He's going to take help from wherever he can get it because he knows his whole regime is collapsing. And if he ever does hold an actual free election, which he's never going to do, he would lose miserably with the voters there in Venezuela. But, and that's the irony of this whole situation, right? Is that the United States agreed to lift its sanctions on Venezuela in exchange for a promise from literally the worst despot in the Western Hemisphere to hold a free election next year. Well, I mean, my
like
God,
really.
does anybody really think that's going to happen? Of course it's not.
Yeah.
This guy makes Vladimir Putin look like an angel in terms of holding elections. So it's just the most naive.
Do you think that's where the Biden
silly thing in the
administration
world.
got the Dominion servers was from a leftover election in Venezuela?
I don't know.
That was a joke. That was a joke.
Yeah,
Maybe
we're
a
not
joke.
going there.
There is another comment here from
Pick
Eduardo.
up Maduro and his orchestra, put them behind bars, the whole conflict will be over. Peace and happiness will be back to Venezuela. True, but someone has to take the initiative to do that. And unfortunately, the Biden State Department has the whole world on fire right now. And we're distracted in places like Ukraine and the Middle East. And so there's no real focus here, yet. We'll see what happens in the coming months.
Dr. Tenney, you see that investments can reduce in the region because this conflict?
Yeah, that was one of my concerns is that, okay, so Chevron, Exxon, Hess had found these fields and they want to develop them. Will those developments go on hold if there's the prospect of armed conflict? I don't know. Would they be anticipating that they would hire private defense contractors, or maybe the American military would come in to protect those assets from the potential of Venezuela coming in and doing whatever it is they're going to do? So yeah, I'm not sure. I think David probably knows more about how the major companies would operate in those kinds of circumstances. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think if there was an actual armed conflict arise, they would probably shut down operations and evacuate their personnel if they perceived any threat that their personnel could come in harm's way. I would, it'd be just like having a hurricane come through the Gulf of Mexico. You just shut it all in and get your people out of there and keep them safe. You hope it doesn't come to that. It shouldn't. If cooler heads prevail, but it's getting harder and harder to identify the cooler heads in this world these days.
Stuart, do you see some American companies, let's see, going back home and do not extend exploration in this area?
I think that's an excellent question, Armand, and I think that's probably why you're seeing so many countries wanting to invest in the oil and gas space. That's why you see Total investing in natural gas energy plants in Texas. That's why you see people wanting to not invest in CapEx in outside the U.S. Now, there are areas like off of Africa's coasts that there are still some good investments, but it's getting tougher out there because you don't know where you're going to find a geopolitical problem popping up. We're going to need the oil, and the oil is not being explored for the known reserves.
That's a great point, by the way, that we need to emphasize here is this Stabroek block, offshore Guyana, is a major focal point of the capital budgets, future capital budgets of the two American major integrated oil companies, ExxonMobil and Chevron, which
That is
is
correct.
about to acquire Hess. This is Exxon's top priority international development globally. Okay. And it's about to become among Chevron's most critical international developments globally as well.
That is correct.
So the implications here for the American oil and gas business, if this should fall into Maduro's hands, are enormous. They can't be overestimated. And, this is a U.S. government, this current administration, that's pretty hostile to American oil and gas companies, and has said repeatedly that it wants to put them all out of business in 10 years. So, that also complicates this whole situation and really makes it a very tense thing inside these oil companies.
Yeah, and you can see the map, the companies that are working in front of Suriname and Guyana.
Yeah, I mean, in Suriname, you have Apache Corporation over there as well. Chevron has a big position. ExxonMobil even has interests offshore Suriname. Shell, so this is just a real major hotspot right now for the American oil and gas industry.
Yeah, that's an excellent point about the forward-looking of the majors, because it's become so difficult to do any increased exploration and production in supposedly democratic regions that they end up having to go elsewhere in order to invest in those kind of capital expenditures for research and development, exploration and development. So, yeah, that's a really good point. Thank you.
Yep.
And unfortunately, the Biden administration has created so much damage to the ability of these companies in the United States to have faith in the fair application of the laws and regulations and the stability of the legal and regulatory system. And that's been an intentional thing by this administration. And so it really makes it harder and harder to invest in exploration for new reserves in the United States.
Yeah, and the same in Canada, the same type of regulatory burdens and the endless litigation by environmental groups and other interested parties who wish to see the oil and gas companies die and the oil and gas left in the ground. If I could make one point about Venezuela, and they're supposed to have these free elections. Well, it was 5 days ago that Venezuela's top prosecutor put out an arrest warrant for, I think it was 12 members of the opposition, saying that they were taking the side of a Guyana and were trying to sabotage the referendum or something like that.
Right.
So much for the possibility of free elections if they're using the referendum as an excuse to arrest the opposition leaders.
Gosh, it sounds like the Biden administration, doesn't it?
David, I am so proud of you. I was about to say that, and you beat David.
Actually,
Let's get a round for David, please. Thank you very much. David, I am so proud of you.
Very good, very good. So, going to the conclusions, do you see any possible solution for this next month in this situation?
I think we send Hunter Biden down, and I think that he has enough that in negotiation skills that we know that then the Biden administration would be interested in doing this. So I think you think I'm making a joke. I think that if there is actually financial implications for the Biden administrations, we might actually get some decent. Somebody's laughing about that. So I'm serious. We've got to get the Biden administration interested in this to actually do something right for the country. 10% for the big guy may be a joke, but it may be a theme song in Guyana.
I just think that a show of force by the United States that's conducting of joint military operations and a statement from the Biden State Department, putting Maduro on notice that the United States would intervene on Guyana's behalf would pretty much put a quietus on any military operations coming from Venezuela. But, it also, the administration would be reluctant to do that because they don't want to be criticized by their normal support base for engaging in colonialism and all the talking points that would come in opposition to that. So politically, it's a difficult thing for the Biden administration because it has to be sure it doesn't alienate its own voter base. So this is a tough deal for everybody.
Dr. Temi, you see Trudeau can help us to solve this problem?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that'd be great. Send Mr. Fancy Socks down there. They can compare notes or something. Yeah, it's so in all seriousness, I think it's too soon to tell what the outcome will be on all of this situation. I'll be curious to see what happens on Thursday at the meeting, but yeah, I don't know. It's just too early, and I hope that a show of force will be enough to get Venezuela to back off. But given that they aren't coming into an election year, who
A show of
knows?
force from
Anything could
Trudeau.
happen these days.
A show
No,
of
from the
force.
United States.
Oh,
From
I
the
was
United
like,
States. Oh my
okay.
gosh.
Oh
Canada
yeah.
would send the beer boat, you know. So that's about all we've got is we have a freighter with that hauls beer around. Seriously.
And Temi, and England, UK is not concerned about this because was something in the past.
It's
No,
not in their neighborhood. And so unless BP or something was involved, I think they know this is in the Americans' neighborhood and the Americans need to deal with it. I think the UK is just dealing with its own mess in Europe and Brexit and everything
See,
else.
you're
And
saying the Falklands was not such a good thing?
well, I don't know, but now with the new fella in Argentina, I don't know. Maybe the UK will get pulled into that one again.
There he is.
Yeah.
I think he threw a
I love how
squirrel
he
into
cut his
China's
cabinet,
plans.
though.
Yes.
The government
think,
department's done.
Sorry.
No.
I think he's an entertaining cat. I'd love to get him on our podcast. So the offer's there, and I would even fly down to get that interview. I think that would be an absolute hoot.
That's great. Thank you so much. It was a great pleasure having Stuart Turley, David Blackman, and Dr. Temi Nimet. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you
Armando,
so
for
much.
trying to
Thank you,
herd all these
Armando.
cats.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
It'll be a great week.
You too.
For sure. Bye.